you everybody for being here. As he mentioned, I'm the VP of the.
Yeah.
Looking forward to this.
Harder systems.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
Great. But more importantly, we have some really great experts here today. Our Chief Information and Security Officer, Jason Collins. Jason really leads up, not only fits cybersecurity efforts and prevention, but also for all of our clients too. We got Tony Petricola over here from Agile Blue, co-founder and blah, blah, blah.
I'll go with that.
Awesome. And Matthias Zumer from our partners at uSecure, who recently expanded also stateside. Very excited about that and looking forward to having all three of you today. So thanks for being a part of this.
Thank you for having us.
All right, we're going to start with a really hard one for Jason.
Yes.
Just kidding. Jason, most of the breaches that we experience and our clients experience aren't just happening from one single failure, but rather a chain of events that have occurred. So from your seat as CISO, not only for FIT, but for our clients as well, where do you see most leadership or executive teams underestimating risk in their organizations?
Yeah, I think a lot of executives overestimate the strength of a single control, a specific configuration to help protect us from a security perspective, and underestimate how small gaps or missteps actually compound and really create that overall higher risk. We'll say, for instance, like the controls, the individual controls I'm talking about are not like the big bucket, high-level areas of like physical controls or administrative controls. I'm talking about the nuanced configurations within each one of those buckets. As an example, MFA. MFA is a specific control under a technical control bucket. And the issue here that I'm speaking about is executives zeroing in on a specific buzzword, we'll call it, or hot topic such as MFA, and saying, oh, I have MFA, we're secure. And they're creating a blind spot for all those other critical and important controls under each one of those buckets, right? So things like over-provisioning of accounts, too many accounts, over-permission accounts. And I think we're all aware that a lot of mistakes are from the human element side, right? Someone clicking on an email, setting a weak password. That's all us. So how can we forget such a control like security awareness training for our staff? So the important part here, the core, is that layered approach is needed because, as Becky alluded to, is these small mistakes aren't a catastrophe in of itself. It takes several chained together to be that catastrophic event.
Great points. And in technology, we love buzzwords. So some of the words we may hear include SecOps. SecOps is security operation tools. So Tony, I want to zoom in on Agile Blue, which is the SecOps company and our partner of choice. Jason's talking about a single focus and tools, security tools. Can you zoom in a little bit about how organizations are still struggling today to identify the right tools and how SecOps can do it differently?
Okay. So you give them a softball, you give me the
Man,
all right.
do it.
I can do that. Look, I think no matter what size organization that you are, especially if you're like in the mid-market, there's probably a couple things you must have. Probably have a ton of tools, right? Like everybody's got tools, right? There's using things like Defender and that EDR, other EDRs. You might be using SIM, using all these different tools. And here's the problem: they're siloed. And no matter what anybody says that we got these great integrations or we can do these APIs, of course you can. Everybody can. But if the data is not correlated correctly, if the data is not being utilized holistically together, I don't care who you are, they're silos. And obviously the bad guys are really good at finding those gaps to exploit those different silos. So I think silos are the biggest problem. The average small business has like 8 or 9 different security vendors. Fortune-sized businesses can be in the 70 or 80s. Like, come on, like that's why they're getting popped all the time, right? Because they don't have a clue where those gaps even exist, right? You probably saw, the big stuff going on with it. We were just talking about that, Anthropic from an LLM perspective. The government's going to stop using it. All right, that's politics. But now they're saying it's a risk to the entire supply chain. But think about your companies, your supply chain as well. What's that risk? You bring in one application that has potentially that gap. that silo in it, all of a sudden that becomes the supply chain risk to your organization, right? And a lot of companies just don't know what that risk is. I think that's a huge one, is that gap, those silos. And then I think the second piece that I would say is, do you even have enough people with eyes looking at what's coming in, what's happening, what needs to be maybe fixed? And I think a lot of folks are just like, whatever religion you might be, obviously I'm not a Christian, whatever you might be, you're like, I think I'm just going to go with this one. Let's just hope for the best on this one, because I don't know, right? I don't know where these gaps might be. We do, my company does a lot of work with state local government. So 40% of our business comes from state local government. I will tell you, they are the least equipped, very understaffed, right? We all see everybody complaining about budgets, why everybody's taxes are going up. Yeah. There's still potholes, and they still don't have people, so like, where's the money going? But my second political statement of the day. So they don't have the people, and generally they're using outdated tools too, which is even more scary. So those types of risks you can really see, whether you're business or government, you can totally see those two things coming together.
Yeah, those are great points. And I think something you're zeroing in on as it relates to silos is just broader security awareness. And often what organizations fail to miss is that internal opportunity. So Matthias, I want to turn to you and talk a little bit about the human element. When it comes to security awareness, a lot of insurance, cyber insurance companies are making you check that box that says you train your employees, but what are people missing when it comes to organizational buy-in and training?
Yeah, good question. I think that the human element of risk and security has been greatly overlooked for a very long time, right? We talk about the inner layer approach, and therefore you need multiple angles. Depending on who you ask, the numbers are about 80 to 95% is human error, right? When it comes to a breach, it's not the hardcore hacker that's going through 15 firewalls and getting in, and that exists too, and that's why this is really important. What you're doing in protection and so on and so forth. But 80 to 90% is the human factor, and nobody really wants to do the training, maybe, or it was overlooked because the emphasis was put on, well, we're good. The old days we had an AV, we're fine. Or now, we have somebody who has a SOC, we're good. Like we're covered. And so with that, it was easy to just rush over it, do a training once a year, 2 hours, right? Make everybody sit through. People have it just running in the background and do something else, and then the box is checked. But that doesn't really help anybody. I mean, if you think about it, if you're running a company, if you own a company, it doesn't matter if you're an MSP or whatever company you have, it's in your best interest to keep your data safe, right? Keep everybody safe, and therefore, why not start with? I don't like to say it, but humans we're oftentimes the weakest link, and we pay a lot of attention to how we do our job. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, right? And we want people to be ready and prepared to do the job. Then somehow we give them a laptop, right, like a supercomputer, access to accounts and all kinds of data, and then we kind of go with the good luck. Please don't click on anything. I mean, if you think about it, and you don't see that. If you have a trucking company, you just don't let people just drive it and say, like, hey, good luck, go ahead. Like, I hope everything goes well. Right? You want people to be trained. You want people to have proper licensing and stay alert and stay trained. Because there's the hardware component that needs to be maintained, taken care of, and secured. There's also the human component to it. So, to come back to your question, right? It was easy to just have it be a checkbox if there was some sort of requirement, if it was a insurance policy or the HIPAA or whatever, but not much attention was paid. The question is, why? How are we overlooking to instead of accepting that humans are the weakest line of defense or the weakest link in the chain, and not focus that shift and educate people and make sure that they are doing their part, right? So it's a mutual effort of a first line of defense, essentially, having strong cyber awareness, so that you guys don't have to jump in as often to clean something up, right? To prevent that from the
it one step further, let's assume everyone in this room has taken that next step and has repeatable security training and testing of knowledge. What's a true measurement of success, successful adoption of security awareness training within a company that executives should be on the lookout for?
Yeah. I think it's, measurable metrics. So not only, we have 20 employees, all 20 did their security awareness training, great, we're done. But taking a look deeper, right? There's phishing simulations. How many people have fallen for a phishing simulation, or how many people have actively reported a phishing, whether it was a simulation or whether it was a real one, but then reported, say, hey, can you take a look at this? This seems fishy, right? That could save the company from a compromise if it was sent to multiple accounts. Right? Somebody reports it and then it gets taken out. So, how proactive are your users? Looking at breaches on the dark web, right? Finding out, what is the user's hygiene, and looking at reporting and creating, measurements for user behavior and how has it shifted towards being more resilient.
Let's just assume everybody in here will at some point, regardless of their layering or proactive training, experience a breach. When a breach does occur, what separates organizations that recover with trust intact versus those that don't?
Yeah, a couple things come to mind. Preparedness is probably the top one. Speed and clarity, and then recovery and resilience. We just have 3 buckets to talk through here. The first one, preparedness. Preparedness always wins out when compared to prevention, or perfection, I should say. Preparedness is these companies that are successful, keeping trust intact, already have a established incident response policy as a prime example. And not only do they have it, they have stepped through it multiple times through some set cadence, through a tabletop exercise as an example, because of they're not having confusion under stress during the incident. They're not creating the book or the process policy during an actual crisis. So everyone knows their role and lane before the event starts. The speed and clarity, right? Is our tooling right? And tooling could be people in this case as well, process and technology. But is the tooling right? Are we able to isolate or contain whatever object is in question or suspicious in a quick manner? Are we able to pull appropriate artifacts or credible facts from that incident? And then, of course, taking those and having that standard, consistent communication to whoever the stakeholders may be, whether it's an internal stakeholder or maybe an external board member or even a partner. Obviously, those are things that not only create trust, but they retain it, especially during a very challenging situation. And the last bucket I'll talk about is just the recovery and resilient side of things. Super awesome, we all have backups, right? And even better that we've got a team that are giving thumbs up that, hey, our backups were successful last night. But how do we know the data is accurate and usable, right? We need that set cadence, whether it's quarterly, monthly, of testing and validating, right? Trust that the backups are good, but let's do that verification step, right? We've heard trust but verify. Undoubtedly, you need to be able to verify that your backups are good on a regular cadence, because that's going to be the true determination on whether or not that incident is just a normal disruption or if it actually translates into a catastrophic event.
Great points. Tony, believe it or not, despite all the news we're
I do
seeing,
believe it.
yeah, there are still leaders out there who are thinking about their investment in security ops tools as sort of like an insurance policy. Like, well, if I don't pay it, there's some risk. How do we help leaders think beyond that hypothetical, it may or may not happen? How do we connect them back to the return on investment for a security operation layering tool?
Yeah. I mean, look, it's a tough question because everybody sees IT, which cyber gets lumped in with a lot, as expense, right? Now, I don't know how you operate a business in 2026 without IT and everything that comes with it, including cybersecurity. You can look at cyber, at all the aspects of cyber, as being the facilitator of your organization. If the organization's disrupted or down, how do you do business? It just doesn't make much sense. I'll give you a great example. You want to talk about catastrophic failures? We have 2 partners in the Middle East, one in Dubai and one in Qatar. And obviously, we are, not obviously because you don't know who the heck we are. For these guys, it's obvious. In the United States, we use AWS for all of our hosting and build all of our applications on. So we're east and west all over the place. So we have complete resiliency around our organization. AWS has one region in the region, in the GCC region, and it was in Dubai, and Iran took that out day one, or night one. So when they took AWS out, they're down now. They're down. So their security, their cybersecurity is now down. So we had to move them to a different region in Australia, and then same thing in Qatar. So at the end of the day, that's catastrophic. Like, how do you predict a war, and then how do you predict that in night one they're going after AWS? Like, come on, like that's nuts, right? It's not nuts, because Iran, doesn't matter how you think about them, just trying to cut off the modes of business, oil, data. If you think about it, the United States of America, it's all about data. It's all about we connect. So if you think about, is there going to be a kinetic war here? I mean, obviously we say probably not, hope not, let's hope we never get to that point. But if you don't think war has already begun from a cyber perspective, it has already begun. You think about AWS about 6 months ago when AWS in Virginia went down. And they said, oh, like an intern tripped over a wire and the went down. Like, does anybody really believe that? Like, we know that was an attack. We know it was an attack. And the word has been, it has been an attack. That's going to happen. Whether it's at your business, whether it's at AWS or in Azure or GCP, whether it's at, Blue Bridge down the street here, who knows? But you know the next war for the United States is going to happen digitally, right? So is the ROI able to be, put together? Sure, you can do all the math, and you can show that it's not an insurance policy. It is a proactive policy to make sure you don't need that insurance policy. And it's the only way you can facilitate your business in this digital age. But at the end of the day, just like Jason was talking about, it's about resilience. If you don't have that, how do you quantify resilience for your organization? It is all about resilience these days. And we have CFOs ask us all the time, like, can you put together an ROI? Totally we can. We can go to Claude and put together one in about 7 seconds. That's why they invented AI, to do my work for me, right? It's easy. But are you really looking at it the right way? Are you looking at a CFO to go to your board and say, we're going to spend $1 million in cyber, which you're not, but say you're $1 million in cyber and it's going to yield us this. No, our business is a $50 million business and allow us to be a $58 million business next year. That's the key to cyber. And it's all about resilience, not necessarily ROI, in my opinion. Spoken like a sales guy too, right?
That's great.
And I think if I can add on to that, it's tricky how you measure that, because truly, if you go get protected, right, and deploy all the tools, like if you go with the technology, for example, right, with MSP, and nothing happens for 2 years, that's a win, right? That you should look at that as your ROI, because things were prevented from like whatever solutions were used and people were there and SOC was watching and whatnot, right? Like there's so many attacks happening that end users are not even aware of them. So it's really hard to sit there and like, hey, what's my ROI if I do this, right? You have to, and I'm sure that came up at some point, right? Like how long can you afford to be down? Is that worth it for you? And what happens if you can't come back up? Like if it was a ransomware and files cannot be recovered, what are you going to do? Are you going to shut down, right? So that's one thing, and then the other, which is close to what we do, where you're probably very well aware of it, but AI is not only helping us to get work done faster, right? Throw in some command to get code and whatnot. Hackers use it too. Ransomware as a service, so many as a service are flourishing on the dark web, right? When it took, when you think, oh, well, I don't know if I need security awareness training, I'm pretty good. Like I recognize when a phishing email comes in. But the game is changing drastically. Not only is cybercrime combined, because the third largest economy in the world, right? It's US, China, and then Cyber crap, Mike. What took a hacker, skill and days, if not a week of recon to put together, a targeted email towards one of you in a business, they can do that now in less than an hour times 1,000, right? Tools that are scavenging social media, taking information, they know who works with who's the customer, and put something together in perfect image, by the way, right? In the past, you looked at something and you're like, I don't know if that's really coming from, that's changed, right? And so, if there's still something like, no, we're too small, we're, we have 10 employees, they're not going to ransomware us. Well, you're hearing about the big ones on the news, right? The big ones on the news, the money they want is 20,000. That's like 200 million or 50 million, 100 million, 10 million, whatever it is. But on that scale, attacking so many small businesses and just getting 10,000 or 20,000 or 50,000, right? That makes them millions as well in a month, right? So that's something else I wanted to throw in there, just how the landscape's changing.
Well, to wrap it up, I want to hear from each of your perspectives within your specific organizations. What is the next evolution? What are your forecasts for the next evolution of cybersecurity? He looks prepared.
Obviously not.
I mean, this is kind of like a soft toss to you almost, but it's like full autonomy from a defense perspective, leveraging AI tool sets to help staff, security staff, to help defend, correlate, look through all that data, right? We leverage it today primarily as a help to our staff, but transitioning that into maybe full autonomy where it's making decisions on our behalf on the data that is collected. I think this year in particular, we're going to see a lot of organizations moving to a full autonomy SecOps approach.
Yeah, I would say two things. I would say, yeah, definitely with more agentic technologies and capabilities coming out, I would say autonomy around not just the investigation, which it pretty much is at this point, the decisioning and the response are, just about there. But we still need a little bit more time, right? There still needs to be a lot more QA. You can't just start shutting down firewalls and DNS servers and then say, oh, it's an hallucination, sorry. People think you're hallucinating them. That's not necessarily good. And I would say the second day is, and I'll build a little off what Tyus was talking about, shadow AI. I mean, are you starting to hear more of that buzz phrase, right? Okay, everybody knows what shadow IT was back in the day. But shadow AI is getting big. In fact, it's the #1 request that we're hearing from our customers. So we're launching some new detection tools at the end of this month. And it's not just about, hey, as a company, we use Claude. If anybody goes to, OpenAI or Grok or something like that, let us know, which that's easy, right? But it's more, did somebody install an agent on our network? When ClaudeBot came out, do you have any idea how many companies were just installing, people were just installing ClaudeBot? It's open. Do you know what's in ClaudeBot? No one knows what's in ClaudeBot. That's nuts. And people were just doing that. So I think you're going to see shadow AI, privileged access, and all these types of things become the next generation of what people are looking at. And then are people stuffing the LLMs full of data that can be extraordinarily harmful? I'm not just talking about bad data. I'm talking about, poisoning that data, what your applications are using. So I think those are going to be really big moving forward because people are just installing all these AI components. I mean, our assistant was telling us today, she do these things called coffee talks, so she does all these organizational things. She's like, yeah, I was using some bot I found on the internet. And I'm like, we're a security company. What the hell are you using? And she just said that. She's like, should I not be? I'm like, oh, God. Maybe you guys think I'm not. But the point is, it doesn't matter. People are just grabbing stuff, put on their personal phones. Well, personal phones still connect to networks, still connects to email. I think that shadow IT is a monster problem that is going to erupt and erupt big.
Yes, I think you're on to something right there. especially when you have independent agents then starting to roam around and everything. It's not. So that's probably the big one. You know, staying informed, I guess, you know, bringing it to like human risk management, human risk intelligence, if you will. You know, not only staying informed, but then also, you know, look at hygiene. That becomes more and more important as well, right? With just threats multiplying, integrating with like vendor integrations, right? Where vendors in the same ecosystem help each other out through integrations, sharing information, that kind of stuff. And then, you know, something that might be able to bring everything together a little bit is following a compliance framework, right? It's very, a lot of fields are unregulated unless you're, you know, in the medical field for HIPAA or financial or what have you, but, you know, following a compliance framework like CIS controls or NIST or something like that, just to get better at being prepared. Not that that is, you know, again, it's not a checkbox, like we're good, we're following CIS controls or whatever, no, it's like, but it's one way to stay informed and stay within a certain parameter to protect yourself from everything that's coming. And, you know, again, with AI, it's speeding up everything, the good and the bad. So we're in for a treat.
Great, thank you all for your insights, and hopefully you all can sleep tonight. But, I do want to open up just for a couple of questions before we break out into the networking portion of the evening, in case anybody had anything they wanted answered.
I'll ask a question. We talk about this at FIT a lot, but I think it would be important to hear from the other people on the panel about, like, we talk about human risk and 97%, and those are really big numbers. How do you not scare your employees? Talking about being proactive and everything, and then if there is a mistake, making them feel comfortable to come and tell you this has happened, instead of being frightened about what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think it's about creating that safe culture within your organization, right? Not shaming or blaming, but, you know, welcoming, you know, making a mistake, then also, you know, reporting something, right? And if it's not phishing, that's okay. I think a lot of it has to do with culture. The worst that can happen is that somebody's afraid now to report a phishing email, or that they clicked on something that they shouldn't have, right? Having it a non-consequential, there might be consequences, but like a non-consequential, like, okay, at least you report it, and having policies in place to enforce that too, right? It's culture enforced by policies that hopefully will create that sort of environment where you got to click on stuff, right? I mean, you have to open documents. You do, and that's what work is, right? So if you're scared to click on any Excel, then we have an even bigger problem. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I know there's some fit people and they hear this from me all the time, but like the culture aspect is so important, because people don't want to just be told, hey, you need to do this. It's getting them to understand and buy in, right? So it's the awareness side of security awareness, right? Why am I doing this? What role do I have in order to protect our organization? So getting people to not just be told, hey, you need to take this 10-minute training and quiz today, is the purpose behind it, right? And how important it is for them to play a role in the security team, because essentially we want everyone to be vigilant, to just be an extension of that security team.
That's smart. You nailed it.
Great.
So with agentic AI usage, like Claude Coder, that can control tools, automate workflows, control your browser, where do you see that headed in, like, being able to prevent it from taking actions as, like, authenticated as you in a browser, and then not knowing when it hallucinates or does something that you didn't even know it did just based on your prompt or whatever? You wouldn't know what changes it made, preventing catastrophes that way. You can't prevent it prevent it from like using browser code? If you do, like, what's the point of using it at that point? How can you control agentic AI usage?
I think the number one thing you can do with it, are you talking about Claude Code in terms of writing?
Cloud code work.
Oh, code work, not code, okay.
Using Excel.
Yeah, because obviously using the coders, I'm sure everybody's engineering teams are using those, from Cursor to Devin to potentially Claude. I mean, obviously not just relying on those, like still running things through like Sneak and stuff like that are really, really important, right? Understanding where those gaps and those vulnerabilities might be from a code perspective. From an application perspective, a lot of it's coming down to two things, and both those things can be beat: policies and training, right? I think training is so underrated right now when it comes to AI. I think everybody's just like, somebody once told me way back in the day, I used to work at Apple when I first got out of college a long time ago, and they say, it's Excel, just figure it out. And people now, I think, are taking the same thing, like, well, just go to the thing, start prompting things. Like, it doesn't necessarily work. There's a right way to utilize these things, especially with the browser-based things, right? And integrating these applications. So I think training, I think a lot of companies are just saying, use it. I don't think you understand, there needs to be training around this technology from all aspects of it. And even our company, like we have subscriptions to a number of these things that we utilize in our company, but we haven't put together a formal training program. We're going to run a company to do that. But I think that's a huge loss right there if you don't do it the right way, because how can you not train and then have policies, or have policies and not train? I think they need to go hand in hand. I think those might be the best ways, and I think both of those ways, though, can be beaten, and that's not a great answer.
I would spot on, Tony. It's shrinking that blast radius, right? So it's not like, all right, we're going to prevent our staff from using it, but what kind of controls? So policy, training, right? The more administrative controls. But I would say before you even allow for any type of AI into your environment, understand what you have in the first place, right? So talk a little bit like asset management policy type things, right? Do you know what you have in order to protect it, right? So in the case of AI, if it was compromised or hallucinating, what does it have access to? What is your data? Who's got permission to what? Understanding what that blast radius could look like if there was a incident, and being able to control that. So again, going off the mindset of like, not if it happens, it's when, and how are we mitigating it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Question?
Yeah, I have a question. So we know its capabilities. We can even project a little bit of what AI will be in the future. And our imaginations, of course, will go wild too. But my question, a couple questions, is what type of like risk management written policies have we, and companies like yourselves have written out in case agent has a hallucination and now your name as a company is associated with it, like the legal ramifications that are wrapped around this? Because I know we're talking about the usage of the technology, but we also, just like cars, if it was truly 100% autonomous, in a liability aspect, who's at fault?
It's a good point. You know, when I was in San Francisco about a month or so ago for a board meeting, and it was the day that a Waymo ran over a cat. I don't know if you saw that. I'm not making a joke of it, but yeah, a cat got run over. And that they're trying to go to court over that, right? And say, blah, blah, blah. But there's not a lot of case law on that, just, right? Not a lot of precedent. So now take AI. There's obviously even less precedent for any case law. So every lawyer is just like, let me get in there, I'll be the guy that establishes that case law, right? So if you think about what's happening with the federal government right now with Anthropic, the two big pieces it said is, number one, it can be a supply chain risk, but number two, that it has its own mind, right? So Claude has its own mind, it has its own constitution, and that constitution is not the Constitution of the United States of America, thus it cannot be used in federal government. That's the case they're making. So now they gotta fight that. So you think about that policy, and think about if you're using Agile Blues tools. So we built our models on top of Anthropic, okay? in our LLMs. Now, we don't share data with our LLMs. Each of our clients gets their own, and it's only understanding the data of each individual client. It's not collecting that data together. It's not learning from the data. It's learning from your data, and that's it for your implementation. So we have a very defined spec of what it's doing and where it can go from hallucinations and stuff like that. But as you're combining data as a different type of organization, where's that data? Who owns that data? Where's that data being trained from? Like, there are so many liabilities that go into that. So when if you're publishing that agent's doing something, you're out, you're running things. I don't think anybody knows the answer to that just yet, because obviously there is no case law for it, and there's no precedent set. Now we're going to start seeing cases, because that case is in court, the autonomous cases in court, and I think you're going to start seeing this stuff proliferate pretty darn quickly. And if you think about it, the last thing I'll say is this. Maybe it's the last thing I'll say. I don't know. Companies were dumping data in it without, redacting it. Samsung did it with their, before they released their published results, right before their earnings went out, and they had data in there. There's been healthcare organizations that have put cancer information in with patients' names, social security numbers, everything, to crunch data to see if they can reduce, outcomes or increase outcomes. Obviously, that data is now in those models. How do you can't just go get that data back, right? All these things are in the courts now, but how are the courts going to figure it out? Like, we've seen judges, I'm sure there's some, they're smart with the ball, but when you put all this together, man, we are at a frontier that I don't know. We might need an AI judge to determine what this new case law is. That's $1 billion
I was
idea.
just gonna say that.
So let's
What are
do
you
that.
doing to wrap up?
Go.
No.
Like, what are you doing as a company to, like, rein that in? Using all these different things and just saying, hey, we only can use this software. We have to have these, redacting and.
I mean, from an internal policy perspective on how staff, and I'm speaking on behalf of FIT here, is we don't have much of a technical control, right? So there's some questionable models, platforms that we have blocked, but there's not many. Because we do see it as an efficiency force multiplier for our staff, right? Still concerns and risks, and we tie that into more of an administrative control, saying acceptable use. This is how you leverage this platform. These are ones that are approved by FIT, and then the technical control is we block the very few. But today, that's all we're doing today, because again, we want our staff to use it to some degree, right? We contain how they should not in the acceptable use, but all this is administrative control today.
We've done the same thing. Our business people, we have a subscription that we pay for that they're able to use. Now, granted, they go home and use their phone or something else. I mean, come on, I don't know. And then our engineering team uses 3 applications, and that's the only ones that they're definitely allowed to use, right?
Yeah, no, it's the same thing. I mean, we have the policy in place, and then, people are required to adhere to it, or if they want to use a different model, ask permission for it. But then there's also the, at home, on their phone or on their private laptop, they might use something else, but, things are connected up. You're looking in the future, there's definitely a bunch of stuff that's going to come that way for real.
All right, we have time for just one more, and then, of course, the happy hour, you can ask questions too. Again, anyone?
We have one in the back I heard before.
No.
I just have one, and then I have one quick story that leads to Jason's answering the question. So this week, I had lots of great calls with clients, and this week one of them shared with me, and they said I can tell the story, I'm not going to tell who it was. They shared with me that they do have a policy that says you can only use the enterprise tools. They selected Copilot, Microsoft for their select tool. But they had an executive who can do whatever they want, decided to use OpenAI to help build out a proposal, we'll say over $100 million proposal. And they were on the phone with one of their subcontractors that, a trusted partner. And as they were working through it, that individual decided, I'm going to ask, ChatGPT, what would this proposal look like? And they started reading to them the numbers, the dollars, and it was an oh no moment. So one of the things that I would like to have Jason answer is, what are the things, this is happening, and we can pretend it's not, but it is, it's real. What's the number 1 or 2 things that we can do as organizations to protect ourselves and our data from this so that our competitive, information, especially you think of a competitive competitive code, you don't want that being out right away, even if it's going to be public record, you're in a process that's competitive. That's like, having your bid known, right? So what should organizations be doing to make sure, besides the written policy, what are some of the things they can put in place, things they should be considering, options that they want to weigh out to help navigate that new world?
Yeah, so Fred, just make sure I understand, prior to bringing in said tool set?
Either way.
Yeah, so I mean, going back to my whole asset management is understanding, one, what data do you have, right? How is it categorized, and who has access to that data, right? So in the case of Copilot and many others are acting on behalf of the user that is prompting it, right?
So, just to
yeah,
clarify,
yeah.
they use an outside tool, and that's how it got it. So they standardize Copilot, but then they use ChatGPT.
Well, okay, so still, I'm going to stay with, it's still a underlying principle is understanding what you have, who has access to it, what, and categorizing. Categorizing specifically around like a tool like DLP, data loss prevention, right? Because then you can put rules, configuration in place to control that data on whether or not it can exit your organization to a OpenAI, ChatGPT as an example. So I think it's very important, again, and if we talk later, I'll probably say this 20,000 more times, like just understanding what you have and who all has access to it is an underlying critical step to protecting the organization as a whole, whether it's OpenAI, ChatGPT, some other LLM, or even some other security event. Like, understand what you have and who has access to it.
Great. All right, thanks, everybody. We'll convene out to have some refreshments, beverages, and of course, if you have questions, I think some of the folks here will be around. So thanks again, everybody, for joining.